It is 9:10, or getting a late start, but we are getting started. Stream running, everything going. We are going to start a countdown to Studio 40 Alpha, starting now. Okay, good evening. Welcome to pjnet.tv. Things are happening, folks. We apologize for coming on late. Hopefully, Dale Didway will give us a little slack later on at the bottom of the hour when he's scheduled. We have a what an exciting time we are about to have. As the crow flies is the book. The author is a former law enforcement officer, retired now. Retired, I guess, in Northwest Florida. Ed Hudson joins us. We're going to have to move a little fast, Ed. We're off to a late start, but special thanks to your daughter.
Yes. Yes,
we did a test run this afternoon, and at the conclusion of that, Ed's computer decided it needed a break. So let's get into it, Ed. You are a lifetime law enforcement officer. Never really thought of yourself as an author, but during your career, you were not only personally involved, you were involved in a multi-agency operation to break up and bring to justice a large network of drug smugglers flying drugs in from Belize to this country, and you've documented it in your book. The book is exciting, but the real story isn't just the adventure, it's the relationships.
yes, sir. It's well, the book pretty much details the life of a guy named Freddie Crow who grew up in Central Florida.
That's near Pensacola, folks.
It's just north of Pensacola, Florida. It's right on the Florida-Alabama line.
It can't be south of Pensacola.
No. No, that's called Cuba, I think.
It's called the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah.
but no, sir. It details his life, and it begins when he was a child, and a rambunctious child, and he loved excitement. He learned to fly an airplane very early in life, and that all kind of funneled into a drug smuggling career.
I was wondering how a country bumpkin like himself learned to fly, but your book reveals that crop dusting is a big part of life in that agricultural community in South Georgia, South Alabama, and Northwest Florida.
Yeah, yes, sir. It is. It's agriculture is a big thing in this area. It's either planted field or pine trees, one or the other. So.
Mm-hmm. He was quite the adventuresome prankster. Several people that he took up for rides swore they would never ride in an aircraft with him again.
Yeah. He delighted in scaring people to death, and he was very good at it. So there was a number of people that would go up with him, and they said that'd be the last time. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they took 2 flights with him, their first and their last.
Yes, sir.
You started out as actually a city policeman.
I did. They're in the small town of Century where he was from. That's when I first came to know of Freddie Crow. And there was some talk of, suspecting that he was smuggling drugs, but a lot of the talk was about his airplane flying and just what a good flyer he was, and there were stories that grew, and that kind of happens when there's something big happening. And some of those stories they weren't even true, as I found out later on, but the ones that were true were better than the ones that weren't true.
Ed, my impression of Eddie's younger years and drug smuggling years was not that of a troubled child or of a monster. Yet he was hauling in 900 pounds of marijuana in a trip, right? But he wasn't a bad guy.
650 to 1,200 pounds, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The thing that really kind of made me take a deep breath, he's flying the airplane down to Belize empty. So he would, once he kind of came into the big money, he would go to Walmart or somewhere, he said, to stock up on T-shirts and clothing items to take to the unfortunate people in that country so they'd have clothes to wear.
He did, and at Thanksgiving it was frozen turkeys and hams that he took down. So he just liked to make people happy. That's just one of his things.
Well, as is the case with many people involved in that world, he not only sold the merchandise, he used some of it.
Yes, sir. He started off with smoking marijuana, but he became addicted to cocaine, and he would. I'm not sure that there's too much that he could get his hands on that he wouldn't try. And but he did grow a fondness of cocaine. Yes.
Ed, do you have a head count of how many characters are mentioned in your book?
I've never stopped to count them. I know it's a number of them. I know it's a lot of them, but there were a lot of people involved in what he did, and it's hard to tell the story, of a group that's smuggling drugs without naming the people in the group. So I know there are a lot of names in the book. Yes.
And of course, all the various law enforcement officers and the multiple agencies involved. So, folks, if you get this book, and I would, it's one of the few that I've really just enjoyed reading. I'm not a reader, Ed. I have to read as a part of what we do here. But I would truly pick this book up and read it if I just knew. Now, but let me give potential readers a little warning. There are a lot of characters. It reads kind of like Chronicles. Begat. Don't get tied up in that. The main characters are the titles of the chapters. And, of course, Freddie was known only as Rambo.
That Freddie didn't want to meet a lot of people whenever he started in this last conspiracy. He was he was a part of several drug smuggling ventures, but in this last conspiracy, he met a fellow named Billy Deacle in prison, and Billy is quite the character himself. And,
he came from a fine family.
Yes, he did. A very fine family.
Very fine.
His grandfather was a judge. No, his great-grandfather was a judge. His grandfather was a sheriff. His father was a high official in the Florida Department of Corrections. His sister worked for the Florida Department of Corrections. His mother was a school teacher. And his brother is a guy named George R. Deacle Sr., who was the last prosecutor for Ted Bundy. So he came from a law enforcement family. He just went his own way.
Well, the two made quite a team. I want to get past the adventure and the plot. I wanted to touch on it because this book, you wouldn't have written this book as an adventure. Okay, I think this book is a story, and I really will wind this up really good, and I won't use my own words. I'll use some words from the book. But when it finally caught up to him, and you were the one that finally, of all the people involved, you were the one that finally arrested, and you didn't actually go to arrest him. You went to arrest Deacle, I believe.
Yes.
But Freddie, I think the waiter or somebody said that somebody had ran out the back door, and you just kind of knew something, didn't you?
Well, I went back and talked to him, but Freddie wasn't arrested at that point in time. But it did place him in the company with Billy Deacle, and at that point in time, we still had Billy Deacle and Rambo had been indicted for 3 years. They had not obtained enough information to say that Freddie Crow was Rambo, but that kind of helped. It was during Billy's trial that one of the witnesses finally came forward and said that Freddie Crow was Rambo. And the interesting thing about that name is the way he got it is he didn't want anybody to know him, so he dressed up in camouflage, painted his face camouflage, wore fatigues, wore a scalpel knife, and he did that to hide his identity, and it worked quite well because they didn't know his name, so they just all called him Rambo.
Well, folks, there's some humorous points in the book too. The one I found that just kind of got me to the point I had to take a break is during the investigation. You subpoenaed evidence, and there was apparently a hotel where he had stayed. So they subpoenaed the custodian of the records of that little podunk hotel, and when they got there to get them, you met the janitor. They thought they met the custodian.
What? He's the one that they sent with the records for the trial. He was the one that was going to present the actual hotel records for the hotel.
Custodian of the records.
Right. He said he was the only custodian they had. So.
Freddie, when he was finally apprehended after years, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, there were two pivot points in his life, and they were almost simultaneous. When he sat overnight in jail, he had some time to think. Okay, but wasn't it you that drove him up to the jail? And there was a conversation in the car, and I think that's where you and Freddie connected at a personal level.
It was that was after. What to begin with, Freddie had a good foundation from his sister, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
She's one who pretty much raised him and his sister and made sure that he went to church. He knew right from wrong. And he even told one of his friends at one time that he knew what he was doing was wrong and he didn't even know why he was doing it. But yes, when he sat in that jail and he was looking at a life sentence, and he knew he had to turn things around. So he chose at that time, right then, that night, to cooperate with law enforcement and just take his lumps. Just do the best he could at his sentencing, but he never, ever talked to an attorney during that time.
Really?
It was after he was sentenced, and I became hired on with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Freddie was a witness in the very first case that I had. It was Freddie's cocaine supplier that he was buying his cocaine from. So I checked him out of prison and brought him back. And after the trial was over with, I took him back to the Eglin prison. And we had a good conversation on the way back about changing his life and about, turning things around. And I even told him then, I said, Freddie, it's not like you got a lot to do. Why don't you write a book while you're sitting there in prison? And he said that he had thought about that. His sister had asked him to do that. And so he was already kind of wanting a book then because he knew that he had changed his life and he wanted everybody to know that. That's kind of the main purpose for the book in so many ways. His family also wanted everybody to know that Freddie had changed his life. He was no longer that smuggler. He was a good, caring, God-fearing man.
He was one of the few that went to the board, including the governor, to get his voting rights restored, and got it.
He did.
Unanimous vote.
He did. Governor Bush and his cabinet, they all voted unanimously to restore his rights.
And Freddie was more than cooperative. He actually was forthcoming and helpful above and beyond. He didn't just answer the questions and sort of the minimum amount. He actually, his life had taken a pivot. He literally wanted to be on board with you guys as part of the law enforcement effort.
He did. He wanted to make amends, is what he wanted to do, and he continuously told me, if there's anything I can do to help, you let me know. And those occasions did come. There were a number of law enforcement agencies that wanted access to him, to talk to him, to find out what he knew, and because he was so successful.
I believe the DHS, or Homeland Security, came down to talk, and the information Freddie gave them wound up literally being briefed to President Obama.
It was. They had a great interest, as you can imagine, in how does somebody get back into this country without ever being detected.
Well, they thought it was latitude and longitude, didn't
they? They wanted the whole route and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And see, they thought there was a hole in the radar system, and I don't think that there was. It was just that he flew so low over the waves of the Gulf of Mexico when he was coming back in for like a 200-mile stretch, that salt would collect on the windshield from the sea spray that from the waves. And when you're talking about flying that low for a 200-mile stretch, that takes talent.
Yeah, overweight with a load. And we're running out of time, but I just don't want to miss anything. And I want to wrap this up. But Freddie was diagnosed with cancer, and that was another real turning point. And he ultimately succumbed to that battle, and the family asked you, a law enforcement officer, the one that was involved more than any other single person in his sentencing, to speak at his funeral.
I did. I spent a lot of time with Freddie after he was diagnosed with cancer, and there were things that needed to be done at his house that I would help do, and I took him to the doctor, and I tried to walk those last steps with him. I did, and I wanted to prepare him. I wanted so much to prepare him, to let him, to help him make that transition, and he did. I still think of the prayer that I had with him before he went to hospice, and how when we were, and it was a prayer of thankfulness, and that may seem strange that I'm on standing over a man's deathbed, and I'm thankful, but there was so much to be thankful for, and Freddie understood that, and when it was over with, the tears just rolling down his eyes, and he beat his chest and said, "I can feel God in me."
I remember that scene very well from the book. Ed, I regret that we're going to have to kind of cut things off because we got a late start. I see that our next guest is in our studio, so we're running a bit late. But let me do this, Ed, because this is not, folks, this is not a devotional book, but I read many devotional books, one of them written by our next guest. And when I do, I make a highlighter mark, at a sentence or two. But this is not a devotional book. But I came across one sentence that I had to highlight. And I'll read it now to kind of sum it up. The words are, "A wonderful story sharing how two people of opposite sides had come together under the cross of Jesus." And I think that sums up not just the book, but the story of discipleship so well, Ed. And I don't know whose words those are, if they're yours or if you're quoting somebody there, but I think that says it very well.
Well, thank you, and I believe it does too. I think that is a very good thing for the book.
Well, Ed, I'm sorry we have run out of time, but thank you for sharing. Thank you for taking on the burden of writing this book, and for the family's sake and for everybody involved, and appreciate you sharing that story tonight as best we could. And we just love you, brother, and wish you the very best in all that you do in your good old fishing age of retirement.
All right. Thank you, Coach. I'm planning a fishing trip now.
All right, man. Appreciate it, brother. All right, that was Ed Hudson, and sorry for the late start, but Del Didway is standing by. We will be using this same studio to have him come have a little chat with us. So if you'll give me just a break for just a minute or two, we'll be right back with Del Didway, and we will continue pjnet.tv. Before I leave, 2 questions. What's the boldest thing you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And when was it? Let's not be satisfied with either answer. What the hell I'm doing? All right, so
That's right. That's
crop
it.
left,
Look like I'm in the manger.
top, yeah, right. Okay, something like that. Then I will go change the titles.
Mm-hmm.
Update titles. Today is the 16th, and it is not Ed Hudson. It is Del, Duduit.